We want someone to at least open.
Hi, I'm Zaid Behzad, the President G, and I hope that I'm one of your chairs, and I hope that we'll have a fruitful discussion today.
Hi, I'm Sheikh Al-Kouari, Vice President of the General Assembly, and I'll be one of your chairs today.
Okay, so to start off, our President of General Assembly is going to be presenting our first resolution, which has passed. So to start off, can we please have one of the chairs from the Committee Against Racism and Injustice present the resolution?
Preamps. Pointing out that the rights of freedom of speech, association, and peaceful assembly are not used to destroy or deny the rights and freedom of others. Nothing with regret, the domestic and institutional racism still exists despite progress, fully believing that the American exclusive white organization KKK is a terrorist group. Nothing with deep concern, the rise in the terroristic acts targeted and committed by minorities and indigenous groups. Operative clauses. Operative Clause 1 encourages to take proactive steps to address the racism and discrimination in all forms, invest in the community programs and anti-Black racism strategies and campaigns. Anti-Black strategies can be soon developed to create an anti-racism secretariat in all countries. Support movements that fight against racially motivated violence against minorities. Operative Clause 2 ensures that the involvement of Black community increases, engage them in different roles in the society. Form a role that ensures that a specific number of Black members are acting in a business environment, addressing systemic racism and injustice in hopes to spread public awareness. Commands the continuous usage of Confederate flags as it is a common symbol for a white supremacy, slavery, and oppression. Help in diminishing the pretoning sense of rage and despair that is targeted and acted upon the name of Southern heritage. 4. Processes increase of security in locations with a high rate of hate crimes committed against minorities. Toughen the process of gun purchasing to ensure the possible gun owners qualify and can be trusted. Introduce background checks. 5. Suggests inevitable consequences for all members of the white exclusive group, the KKK, upon a range of a terrorist act. Limit the minimum years of interaction of KKK members to not be less than 20 years. I yield the floor to Delegate of Saudi Arabia.
Thank you, Delegate. We will now be welcoming the means emitter speech. You will have 2 minutes to present your speech. And Chair Donna will be presenting the timer on her screen.
So your time begins now.
Thank you. Good afternoon, everyone. Firstly, I would like to state that this resolution tries to deal with a range of problems that are available when it comes to the KKK violence rising in the United States. If we scroll up for a minute and we take a look at the reforms that talk about getting the Black community more involved in the USA, we are looking at decreasing the ratio between Black and white people who work in Black and white communities. For example, if we look at the ratio of police officers when it comes to Black officers to white officers, you've got 67% of police officers are white, whereas 12.4% of them are Black. This is obviously going to create some sort of systematic racism in terms of white people predominantly viewing Black people as more violent or convicting them of racist allegations that could potentially not be true or could be elevated to an extent that isn't really what's happening. Second of all, when we talk about the banning of Confederate flags, since the Confederate flag acts as such a huge resemblance of racism and crimes that are committed in the South, banning this will potentially stop the outrage and the potential of a spread of this racism and this notion that we're doing this for the sake of the Confederate flag. That's going to stop and limit that. And background checks, obviously for guns, because gun crime is something that is so valuable that we really have to focus on and look at. So just reducing that, making sure that people are not taking guns in order to prosecute or convict people themselves will really help the situation that is happening in America today. Hence, this resolution perfectly looks at different reforms in order to deal with this problem. Thank you.
Thank you, delegates. You now have to take 2 mandatory points of information. Are there any on the floor?
How does a delegate define the effectiveness of Operative Clause 3 as white and Black people working together may potentially bring a rise in the racist activities or racist behaviors amongst the colleagues?
The delegates believes that since we have stated that background checks are going to qualify and that we are going to encourage the employment of Black members of society into jobs that are qualitable and important for the betterment of society, that will slightly raise awareness of the importance of having both races existing and coexisting together, helping each other to survive in America. And not simply survive, but to thrive. Because we need to enforce the fact that coexistence is something that is extremely important. Because without one, the other cannot really stay, because they're all part of one society. And that racial idea or that racial viewpoint that racism is going to stem because two different races work together has to be nullified. Thank you.
Delegate of Saudi Arabia, are you open for any more points of information?
Yes.
Are there any more points of information on the floor? Please raise your electronic hand now. Delegate of the USA, you have been recognized, followed by Delegate of Iraq.
All right, so the delegates of USA would like to say that that they agree with the injustice in terms of the ratios with job opportunities between races. However, how will the delegates control like petty job opportunities or publicity hires in which people are selected on based on their are not selected based on their qualifications, but instead on the basis of race, as this would the poor efficiency in companies that are performing these publicity hires would severely affect the US economy in the long run.
Sadly, there is no given method for us to control that. It is something that is happening. It is something that we as a society have still not developed a means to combat these hires. And I completely agree with you when you say that it's going to deteriorate the American economy because there is no way to combat it, sadly.
How does the delegate tend to deal with the retaliation that might occur when banning the Confederate flag, such as what has happened briefly at the Capitol riots?
The delegate has stated previously that the delegate wishes to enforce a three-strike policy. However, that three-strike policy might not be as reliable. If actions were to fall out of hand or escalate, the delegate believes that strict convictions must happen. The delegate is completely in favor of prosecuting and death penalties if hate crimes increase to a point that they can't be controlled.
Thank you, Delegate of Saudi Arabia. We will now be moving to for and against speeches. Are there any for speeches on the floor? I will repeat again. Are there any for speeches for this resolution? Okay. Are there any against speeches? Delegate of Iraq, you have been recognized. Reminder that an against speech is supposed to be 1 minute, and we will show you a timer on the screen.
Delegates of the General Assembly. Delegate of Iraq is here today to state that this resolution is valuable, but it does not fix the issue. Racism has been a long-standing issue, and the rise of hate crimes and the rise of evilness and hatred that is in humans will not simply go away if we just try to fix things. We need to find the essence of what the hate is doing and what the racism is being for it to solve. And as the delegate of Saudi Arabia stated, that a solution to retaliation would be the death penalty. Now, how is that any better than what they are doing to the innocent people if we kill them? How will they learn?
Thank you, Delegate. We will now be taking 2 mandatory points of information. Are there any on the floor? Delegate of Germany, you have been recognized.
The delegate in their speech mentioned about the essence. Can the delegate further define what they mean the essence is?
When the delegate meant the essence of racism, and the essence is that human beings are known to be evil people, and has that hatred inside them. So the essence to fix the problem is to how to fix the racism. How? Because racism isn't genetic. It isn't in our biology. It is taught. So we need to fix how to not teach racism anymore.
Are there any more points of information on the floor? Delegate of the United States, you've been recognized.
Does the delegate agree that the entirety of this resolution does not take into consideration any of the severe short-term effects of suddenly implementing such radical legislation in a country that's essentially based on freedom and independence?
The delegate clearly agrees with that and clearly sees that.
Thank you. We will now be moving on to against speeches. Are there any on the floor? Delegate of Lebanon, you've been recognized. You have 1 minute to give your against speech.
The Delegate of Lebanon is not against this issue, but definitely against this resolution because it simply revolves around one, either just raising awareness, or two, not properly addressing the issue, not properly finding a definite solution to the issues. The only clauses that state actual solutions are clause 4 when it talks about an increase of security. Why should the delegates increase in security? Security is not the problem, it is the double standards that are the problem. There is already such a high level of security. If we increase security, so what? There is still a double standards. People will still ignore the security that is being supervised. For example, the George Floyd situation, it was recorded, yet double standards are still there. And about the strategies, what strategies in clause 1AI? Strategies, what strategies and when will they be implemented? That is the question. They are all open-ended. There are so many alternatives. There is no definite solution to any of these solutions being proposed. They could easily be debunked.
Thank you, delegates. Are you open to receiving any points of information?
Yes.
Are there any points of information on the floor? Please raise your electronic hand. Delegate of Russia, you have been recognized.
Points of personal privilege.
Yes.
Can you please scroll? Can the chairs please scroll down? May the delegates of Russia state their points of information.
Delegate, go ahead. You have been recognized.
Does the delegates of Lebanon denies that operative clause 5's effectiveness?
Operative clause 5 might be effective, but the other operatives are not effective. If anything, the delegates here within this council should not take any risks by submitting a resolution that is incomplete. These are people's lives at stake. The delegates should not take any risks. The delegates should not proceed with a resolution that is not fully developed. With resolutions with solutions that state further developing or in the future, or talking about solutions so futuristically as if magically they're all going to come together, that everything, all the pieces of the puzzle are going to piece together. And may the delegates, may the chair scroll up, please. Also, the delegates like to point out the keyword in clause 2AII, addressing systematically racism. That is simply just raising awareness. Raising awareness and support will only take you such a long way, but does it actually do something? When you repost, when you post, when you donate, what comes after? People have been trying to raise awareness for years now on end. Yet this situation, the double standards, it's still going on. And just raising awareness is not enough. Indefinite solutions is not enough. The solutions have to have a period. They have to have a full stop. They have to end racism. And the delegate also agrees with delegates of Iraq when they have mentioned that racism is taught. Therefore, just simply raising awareness, just simply implementing higher security will not fix anything, because higher security is already there. Double standards is what's being taught. We should stop teaching double standards. We should teach the opposite of that.
Thank you, Delegate of Lebanon. We have received an amendment from the Delegate of the USA to strike out Clause 2 entirely. Main submitter, do you take this amendment as a friendly one?
Yes, friendly.
So we will go ahead and we will strike Clause 2 entirely.
Given that we have removed an operative clause, we are now going to be going back to for and against speeches regarding the resolution as a whole. Are there any on the floor? Are there any for speeches? Delegate of France, you've been recognized.
Yeah, sorry, the delegate has an against speech, not a for speech. Sorry.
Okay, that's fine. You're going to have it to your speech and your time is going to be displayed on the screen.
Okay. All right. So this resolution is very is very non-specific, and it's very temporary. It's a temporary fix. The delegate just wants to go back to what the delegate of Iraq said, that again, this is such an important point that it has to be mentioned again. Racism is taught. This resolution isn't targeting the heart of the problem. It's just a temporary fix. Then again, for clause 3, you can't delegates can't really, especially the UN, can't control local or national legislature. You can't control national laws, and then again, you can't. On top of that, you can't control a nation's freedom of speech laws when the nation itself is built on a foundation of free speech. It just wouldn't work. This resolution is very, very temporary, and it doesn't really target the problem at its heart, and therefore it shouldn't pass. The delegate completely disagrees with it.
Thank you, delegate. Are you open for any points of information?
Yes, the delegate is open.
Are there any points of information on the floor? Delegate of India, you have been recognized.
Thank you. The delegate of France has mentioned about this freedom of speech of the nation being at stake simply because of authorities taking action on the racism acts. But isn't there a difference between racism and isn't there a difference between freedom of speech and ignorance?
There is definitely a fine line between freedom of speech and ignorance, but freedom of speech highlights your ability to speak freely for yourself and display your thoughts, while what you mentioned has nothing to do. Ignorance is just your lack of information on a specific subject.
Thank you.
Thank you, delegates. Due to time restrictions, we'll now be moving on to voting procedures. All those who are for passing this amendment, please raise your electronic hands. All those who are against passing this resolution, please raise your electronic hands. Due to clear majority, this resolution has not passed. Clapping is not in order.
We will now be moving on to the next resolution. Okay, so may the main submitter please come forward and read the resolution.
Operative Clause 1. Recommends the use of UN task force to make unscheduled checks, which should include financial checks, assets, salaries, and how much they pay in taxes. Judicial forces of Lebanon should reassess the Lebanese constitutional laws and political rights in order to refine them further to restrict loopholes that allow the government to get away with corruption. Operative Clause 2. Suggests government-funded election campaign. Subclause A. Therefore, all candidates get equal opportunities to present themselves to the public. Subclause I. This will eliminate external influences on parliamentary elections. Operative Clause 3. Strongly urges full transparency to the United Nations about the imports and exports of explosive and chemical resources. Subclause A. This will decrease the chances of explosions such as the Beirut dock explosion. Operative Clause 4. Calls for measures to be taken to reduce hyperinflation. Operative Clause A. Operative Clause A. Increase interest and profit rates. Subclause I. This will result in increased demand. Subclause 1. This slows down the economy and initiates deflation. Operative Clause Subclause B. Reduces the supply of money in circulation. Subclause I. This will gradually increase the value of the currency. Operative Clause 5. Deplores the attitude of the Lebanese government as it resigns amid such a tragic situation left their citizens. Subclause A. Therefore, the creation of secondary parliaments will be recommended in order to take over in such situations. This will reduce the pressure of the elections on such intense times. Subclause 6. Operative Clause 6. strongly urges the Lebanese Republic to follow the national anti-corruption strategy in order to rebuild the Lebanese government without any malversation, to implement the 2020 law on illicit enrichment and assure the financial checks be made every 6 months for the first 2 years, especially with the new government, to ensure past mistakes are avoided. Subclause C, to ensure the Lebanon Reform, Recovery and Reconstruction Framework is followed and obtain the best possible results and reconstruct Lebanese infrastructure.
Delegates, you will now have 2 minutes to give your speech. Your time starts now.
Can they just scroll up?
Yeah, sure.
Delegates of the General Assembly, the issue today is the systemic corruption in the Lebanese government. The Delegate of Iraq strongly believes that this resolution solves that issue at a slight point. Firstly, it recommends a UN task force which make unscheduled checks and which will include financial checks and assets and salaries. This can ensure that corruption may be present, but it will be strongly reduced with the UN looking at them. Operative Clause 2 suggests a government-funded election. This will mean that every single candidate will get an equal opportunity to present themselves, and not because of higher standards, because of money. And that can also lead to corruption. Operative Clause 3 is the fuel transparency. The Beirut port explosion was a horrendous and tragic event. But the Delegate of Iraq believes that if they had full transparency with the UN, and the UN would not allow that much of ammonium to be present in the port, then that could have been prevented. And hopefully this will prevent any further issues like this in the possible. Hopefully that does not happen, but if so. Hyperinflation is a big issue in Lebanon and a reason for their corruption. So making sure that reduced hyperinflation will also solve the corruption. Scroll down, please. In 5, after the Beirut port explosion, the government just abandoned the country. This will make a secondary parliament. So if that ever happens again, because the trust between the people and the government is very little, so if that ever happens again, they will not be left alone. And an anti-corruption strategy is really, really important because that's how it's going to be solved. Thank you.
Thank you, delegates. You now have to take 2 mandatory points of information. Are there any on the floor? Delegate of the USA, followed by the delegate of Lebanon.
So is the delegate aware, in addressal to Clause 4, that inflation is not a simple economic issue, and it's not a black and white cause and effect relationship with interest? That's classroom econ, that's not real life econ. So a rise in interest placed in such a fragile economy in this state could instead result in a national poverty crisis or market failure.
The delegate is not aware of that, as they do not take econ, so they are not aware of economic terms.
Does the delegate believe that with all these solutions being proposed in this resolution, that the Lebanese people would be able, or would be willing, not just able, would be willingly able to gain the trust of the new government after all the corruption, after the horrendous past?
No person will be willingly and so eager to trust a government that has failed them. But again, with that said, a country cannot even work without a working government. So with this resolution, it is really hopeful, and it is really trying to do the best it can, because a country can't run without a government, and people will want a government that they can trust. So with this, and with hoping that all these solutions that will end corruption in the Lebanese government, that this will slowly regain the trust that the Lebanese people have lost in their government.
Thank you, Delegate. Due to time constraints, we'll be now moving to for and against speeches. Are there any for speeches on the floor? Delegate of Germany have been recognized.
Oh, I'm so sorry. I have an against speech.
That is fine. Is there any delegates who are wishing to give a for speech? Are there any delegates who wish to give a against speech? Delegate of Germany, you have been recognized.
All right, the timer. The delegate of Germany strongly believes that most of the points written in these operative clauses are not something that can be implemented in real life. When they say recommend the use of UN task force, as Lebanon as a country after the recent explosion and after the huge fall in their exchange rate, we can see that the entire government, the entire system is corrupted. And it is extremely easy for them to window dress their accounts, and show that they haven't been earning since there's no employment in the country after the explosion, after people's houses have been destroyed, after there's no proper care that they have gotten. Moving on to Operative Clause 4, it says increased profit rates. Increased profit rates, which means government will help the businesses with subsidies, and then there will the final cost price will fall. People will have more money in hand. When people will have more money in hand, according to the basic demand law, the demand will increase and inflation will rise. It will not.
Thank you, delegate. Your time is now done. Are you open to any points of information?
Yes.
Are there any points of information on the floor? Delegate of Iraq, you've been recognized.
Delegate of Germany, if the UN cannot stop the corruption and cannot even try to stop the corruption in Lebanon, then who can?
The delegate never mentioned that
Delegate
the UN.
That is out of order. Delegates of Iraq, you cannot ask the delegates of Germany a question about the UN, given that you are discussing it as members of the United Nations. That is out of order. Would you like to rephrase your question?
Yes. If the UN as a whole, if all the delegates here cannot help Lebanon in this time, then haven't we as the UN failed a country?
The delegate did not ever say that the entire UN as a whole or all the countries together with an agreement cannot make a difference. All the delegate is questioning is the effectiveness. It is known after the recent explosion that the entire government is corrupted. Does the delegate think that as a whole, going to them, why would the other countries even take out the time to go and solve problems for Lebanon? So as a whole, the delegate is questioning the effectiveness of the UN task force. The delegate never mentioned that a trial could not be helpful. However, would it be effective is the real question.
Thank you, Delegate. We will not be entertaining any amendments due to time constraints. We will now be moving to voting procedures. Those who are for this resolution, please raise your electronic hand. Delegates that are against this resolution? Delegates that are abstaining? Delegates that are for this resolution, can you please raise your electronic hand now? Due to clear majority, this resolution has passed. Clapping is in order.
We will now be moving on to another resolution.
The main submitter, can you please start presenting your resolution?
Yes. Operative Clause 1 suggests instead of forcing detainees to continue living in segregation cells with many people, they should increase the amount of rooms and limit each room. Subclause A, the amount of people in each room should be limited to 7 people to ensure social distancing. Subclause B, children under 15 who have been separated from their parents and do not have an adult with them should have caretakers specific to them to cater to their needs. Subclause I, caretakers are required to ensure their safety and well-being. Subclause C, create more rooms in order to reduce cramping of people in one specific cell. Clause 2, request to develop and expand healthcare services. Subclause A. Bring specialized doctors to these detention camps to prepare COVID tests and holding random tests. Subclause B. Donating medical supplies including sanitizers, masks, first aid kits, COVID tests, and more. Subclause C. Starting organizations and charities in order to ensure and promote healthcare services. Subclause D. Provide psychiatrists in these camps to assist detainees with mental health issues. Clause 3. Proposes funding provided by the UN Charter could be used to fund educational centers within the detention camps. Subclause A. By providing educated teachers and providing supplies in order to virtually teach people in detention camps. Subclause I. Building a miniature library. Subclause B. Introduce new job opportunities in these camps which cater towards COVID-19. Subclause I. For example, cleaning and teaching. Clause 4. Encourages the creation of a treaty for ICE to sign which would ensure the safety of the detainees and consequences must be implemented if broken. Subclause A. The punishment will include a sum of money paid depending on how intense the actions were against the detainees. Subclause B. Random monthly checks on ICE to ensure that the people being detained are receiving basic necessities. Subclause I. These necessities include clean water, food, and a good place to sleep. Subclause C. Assist and record what detainees in detention camps have to say regarding their treatment. Subclause I. Report back any complaints and find solutions to compromise for these complaints. Clause 5. Further recommends to propose awareness campaigns that focus on COVID-19. Subclause A. Giving detainees donated electronic devices with informative apps about COVID-19. Subclause B. Detainees need reliable knowledge to minimize the possibilities of disease transmissions. Subclause C. Posting posters around the camps about the importance and procedures of hand washing and sanitizing. Subclause D. The importance of COVID-19 vaccines to inform and limit the spread of the disease. Subclause E. Provide a first-line care worker to give an education session regarding the dangers of COVID. Before we move on, I would just like to shed light on the issue. It discusses ICE's treatment and its inhumane treatment towards refugees in these camps. Thank you. I'll now be yielding the floor to the delegate of Mexico to present.
Delegates,
Yeah.
Delegates, you are now required to make a main submitter speech for 2 minutes. Your time starts now.
This resolution equally focuses on the human rights and also minimizing the COVID cases within these detainee camps. It recognizes the clear human rights violations and the ill treatments of the people that are held in these camps and these detainees that are being mistreated. It encourages social distancing, where more rooms would be built and it would be limited to only 7 people. So that would ensure social distancing and would definitely minimize the amount of cases and the growth of the pandemic within detainee camps. Can the chair scroll down, please? It also informs the detainees about the dangers of the coronavirus and how to protect themselves from it. So, as well as having annual checkups with the detainees to ensure that they are not being mistreated by ICE or that there isn't any ill treatment happening. Also, it values the health of the detainees the most and prioritizes it. So there's going to be annual checkups for everyone held in the detention camps, and as well as providing them with this necessary tools and equipment that they would need to protect themselves from the coronavirus. Thank you.
Thank you, delegates. You're now required to take 2 mandatory points of information. Are there any on the floor? Delegates of Saudi Arabia, you have been recognized.
Thank you. Delegates of Mexico, the delegates wanted to inquire what are the sizes of the rooms going to be that will be built to habitate 7 people?
In order to maintain the social distancing, which is recommended by WHO, it would be around to ensure that there's going to be at least 1 meter distance within each detainee. So that's going to be the main requirement for it. The details would be around 20-ish.
Thank you.
Are there any more points of information on the floor? Delegates will be now moving to for and against speeches. Are there any for and against speeches on the floor? Are there any for speeches on the floor? Delegate of Russia, you have been recognized.
Thank you. May I start?
Yes, you may. I'll put the time right now.
The delegates of Russia strongly believe that this resolution should pass as it covers almost nearly everything that needs to be covered, from education to rooms to vaccines. May the chairs please scroll down a bit. Sanitizers, first aid kits, as well as awareness. Now, most of the delegations do realize that awareness might not be the strongest solution. However, in this case, when it comes to ICE, many people are not as aware as they should be. So the delegates of Russia feels like this operative clause is very much necessary. Regarding the other operative clauses, the delegates of Russia strongly believes that they are extremely straightforward, that they do not need more to be added to them, or they don't need to be lessened. May the chairs please scroll up. These operative clauses are humane, as it values children from children to adults.
Thank you, delegates. Your time is up. You are now required to take 1 minute mandatory points of information. Are there any on the floor? Delegates of Iraq, you've been recognized.
The delegates of Russia strongly believe that COVID-19 has been a hardship, but especially it's been a hardship for the ICE detainees, especially the children in the ICE detainees, and this resolution solves everything in that. Does the delegates also agree with this?
The delegates believes that most delegations have heard of the problems that are related to ICE and the treatments that occurs, and I believe that this resolution completely covers every single thing that needs to be implemented, and this resolution should absolutely pass. And the delegates of Russia urges every single delegation in this council to pass this resolution.
Thank you, delegate. We will now be moving to against speeches. Are there any against speeches on the floor? Delegates of Germany, you have been recognized.
Timer. The delegate of Germany mostly agrees with all of this resolution as it solves the pandemic problem for all kinds and sorts of people. However, the delegate just wants to add on the professions and take note of those professions which include traveling, since this entire resolution does not combat the problem of corona of the virus while traveling, be it within country or international flights, relating to the precautions that could have been taken over the airport, over aircraft, be it sea traveling, which could be taken on sea boats, be it any sorts of traveling, and there could be more additions in form of stating that how many tests are required before and after a person travels, the quarantine before and after traveling procedures. Only that addition could have made this being made to this resolution.
Thank you, delegates. You are now required to take 1 mandatory points of information. Are there any on the floor? Just to clarify, delegates, this is an against speech. Delegates of Mexico, you have been recognized.
Wouldn't the delegates of Germany think that it would be unnecessary to monitor all of these things since the main issue is minimizing the COVID-19 cases within these detention camps?
The delegate is aware that the main issue is within the detention camps, but as stated, there are doctors, there are specialized doctors that are required, and most of the time, specialized doctors are the availability is not in almost every possible country. They are usually brought in from highly developed countries, from countries which follow researches. So that is exactly why the delegate mentioned that they can, let's say, if they do not bring, they can pass on the virus. Even though they are vaccinated, they can be transporting the virus from one country to another. So in context to those doctors, the delegate thought that one necessary addition would be appreciated.
Thank you, delegates. Unfortunately, due to time restrictions, we will now be moving on to voting procedure. All those who are for the passing of this resolution, please raise your electronic hand. All those that are against this resolution, please raise your electronic hand. All those that abstain. Due to a clear majority, this resolution has passed. Clapping is in order.
Okay, delegates, we will now be moving on to the next resolution. May the main submitter please read their resolution.
Honorable chairs, fellow delegates, in awareness of the spread of bashful criticism behind pejorative terms, emphasizing that people are weakly educated about destructive effects of racist comments over other individuals, further noting that influencers such as musical artists and public figures have used these terms offensively as witticism in casual situations, deeply disturbed by the loss of and abuse of individuals that were affected severely by the violations and injured by aggressors, encourages demonstrations and worldwide donations calling for help when acts of discrimination get out of hand. Subclause A, called upon all countries to cooperate and to offer safety to the public, referring back to the Black Lives Matter situation as a specimen. Subclause B, and raise awareness on the matter of pejorative terms being used. Urges allies to raise organizations to help raise awareness. Subclause A, in form of posters, social media posts, and petitions. Subclause B, attracts the younger generations into making a change and understand the seriousness of the after effects of their actions. Authorizes actions calling for justice and recognition against the public and online offense. Subclause A, anti-Asian violence that has been rising very recently in racial terms all over the world. Invites global cooperation such as hiring custodians to supervise pejorative terms casually used in musical productions and online influencers. Subclause A, social media has its privacy terms and conditions by reporting inappropriate actions, and subclause B, add age restrictions to online content. Thank you.
All right, delegates, you now have 2 minutes to give your main submitter speech.
I would like to yield the floor to the delegate of Germany.
All right, the delegate of Germany, you now have 2 minutes to give your main submitter speech. Your time starts now.
All right. The delegate of Germany claims this resolution as a strong resolution as it addresses to the internationally spread circulated problem of use of slurred terms or offensive terms, racially offensive terms, and it urges all the countries to come together and solve this problem from the root. And it has proposed well thought procedures of how this could be done. In Operative Clause 1, as it is encouraging demonstration and worldwide donations for help in form of petitions so that people can come together and donate. People can come together and they can, through the petitions, get awareness of what is going on. Some people, it is very common for songs to get viral with all of these slurry terms, and kids to normalize these situations and sing those songs out loud from their cars or play those songs in their cars due to the lack of awareness. Just due to the lack of awareness or due to the lack of knowing what the term actually means and how it could offend some certain nationality, race of people. Additionally, it is urging for all the NGOs, all the organizations in order to help, in order to make a change, to come together and stand against this problem all together. Thirdly, it says it authorizes actions, it authorizes laws and regulations such as the anti-Asian violence. It opposes the anti-Asian violence and wishes to get new laws and regulations for all the people who present racial acts in public places in form of police, however, dressed like normal people. Number 4, Operative Clause 4 says that it invites global corporations such as hiring custodians, basically policemen who invigilate, who investigate.
Your time is now up. You are now required to take a mandatory of 2 points of information. Are there any on the floor?
Point of percentage.
Yes?
May the chairs please scroll up a bit?
Yes, sure. Delegate of Russia, you've been recognized.
Thank you, Chair. Does the delegates of Germany realize that Operative Clause 1, 2, 3, 4 have already been implemented since before even 2020? These operative clauses are already implemented, or already happening, meaning these operative clauses are nothing new nor creative.
The delegate is aware that these operative clauses are being implemented. However, the delegate now wants to present this resolution to start to make a change. These have been just kept on the side due to other problems such as the pandemic coming forward. Now this is the high time, due to actions going on around the globe, to bring it back into the note, into the focus, so that changes can be made.
Thank you, delegates. We will now be entertaining 1 more point of information. Are there any on the floor? Delegates of Lebanon, you've been recognized.
The delegate has stated that they are aware of these solutions already being implemented. However, they are aiming for a change. In what way would the delegates improve these solutions, develop these solutions that will eventually lead to a change? Because these solutions have been around for such a long time that people have tried changing them, people have tried developing them. They have been developed, but have they started a change? Have they had any sort of impact that wasn't just temporary?
The delegate wants to state that in all of these operative clauses, it is stated the global corporation which can be done through different kinds of economic activities, such as forming bilateral and multilateral trade agreements. One of the examples could be considered as the Asian countries of Pakistan and China, which formed a trade agreement between them, and now there is so much more acceptance of one another's nationalities in both the countries. And a part of Pakistan named Gwadar, a port, is given all away to China for them to work, for them to do their imports and exports in such a way that globally trade agreements be formed, and then they can accept one another and come to a conclusion that all people living in this world are same. Nobody is superior to the other. However, this has to be done economically through the government and through the global corporation, through multinational and bilateral agreements between country governments.
Thank you, Delegate of Germany. Due to time constraints, we will now be moving to for and against speeches. Are there any for speeches on the floor? If there are any for speeches, please raise your electronic hand. Delegate of India, you have been recognized and you have 1 minute to state your for speech.
Honorable Chairs, fellow delegates, the Delegate of India highly agrees with this resolution and agrees with the fact that the pejorative terms are unacceptable in society and the world. However, it has almost become a norm in the world when in use of normal things such as songs, and even when people are casually speaking to each other. And the delegate agrees on the resolution in terms of that in order to prevent it, there should be authority actions towards the people saying it in a sense and intention to offend the nation, along with awareness and education regarding it in schools and homes. Thank you.
Thank you, Delegate of India. You now have to take 2 mandatory points of information. Are there any on the floor? Delegate of the UK, you have been recognized.
Well, realistically, when thinking about writing songs or however, then we should look at the 60s. The 60s were truly an era of change, but they wrote the best songs about peace and love and whatever, and this still didn't solve anything. So realistically, how is the delegate going to ensure that all these forms of awareness are actually a feasible and realistic solution?
Can the delegate of the UK rephrase his question?
How does the delegate believe that all these forms of awareness are actually going to cause a change that is going to change the world? Because these things have been implemented previously, and as I said in my example, in the 60s, they wrote the best songs about peace and love, and still nothing. So how is the delegate going to ensure that all these forms of awareness are actually something that is realistic, feasible, and not hypothetical?
Well, if we go back to the previous resolutions, the pejorative terms have a lot to do with racism, and it's taught. Not, you're not born. Nobody's born with racism; they're taught. So just like that, pejorative terms are often influenced when people surrounding an individual are saying it and are expressing it in the same time. So when we influence the youth and other people according to the influencers of today, it can really impact a change on it, because back then in the 60s, making a change was not that easy because everyone had a fixed mindset. Well, now we are not just now in this generation, diversity and mixed thinking, critical thinking is not just promoted, but it is also said that, and it's also like fixed in a way that saying pejorative terms and being racist and having an ignorant way of thinking is not acceptable in any sort of way. Thank you.
Thank you, Delegate of India. Are you open for any more points of information?
Yes.
Are there any more points of information on the floor? We will be entertaining one more point due to time constraints. Delegate of Saudi Arabia, you have been recognized.
Thank you. How does the delegate suggest that the 60s are any different than now, given that the delegate has stated that the 60s it was difficult because it was racism and these terms are something that is taught. However, what is the difference now? How is this resolution going to apply to anything that is current?
Well, just like how I said that back then, raising awareness of something back then was hard because everyone in that generation had a fixed mindset. Just like how it took so long to normalize the fact that it's not okay to hit women. Just like that, it was hard to raise awareness that saying pejorative terms is not okay. However, when we developed and we kept developing the same slogan that this is not okay, saying pejorative terms even as a joke is not okay. It's more easier because many people are now open-minded and more diverse when they're thinking in this generation, because now it also has become a stigma, not a stigma, but like it has become an agreement that this is not okay.
Point of order.
Yes, delegate.
The delegate hasn't answered my question. She just went around in circles.
Delegate, that is in order. Please rephrase your question.
The delegate of India stated that just like how back then people had a fixed mindset, it is not the same as the people of this generation, since there is more critical thinking and diverse way of thinking into not just thinking that pejorative terms are not okay, but it's unacceptable. Thank you.
Thank you, Delegate. As a reminder, please refrain from using personal pronouns. We will now be moving to against speeches. With any on the floor, please raise your electronic hand. Delegate of the UK, you have been recognized.
Well, the truth is about this resolution is that it's too hypothetical. Well, it encourages, it urges, it authorizes, but where is change really? The delegate just wants to find change in this resolution, but it's just something that's too hypothetical, something that has been overused previously, and it does not suggest any real life situations. And when the delegate was asked questions, the delegate kept on roaming around circles and referring to other eras and giving things that were not really factual, as this resolution as a whole is hypothetical. There are no solutions in it. And this is why this resolution should not pass, as where is change when we are a generation of change that's supposed to change the world? Where is change in this?
Thank you, Delegate. Are you open to any points of information?
Any and all.
Delegate of Russia, you have been recognized.
Does the delegate of United Kingdom agrees that this resolution is so vague, non-creative, and not original at all, as these operative clauses have already been implemented, and yet it did not make as much difference as it should be, and this entire resolution is not as effective at all?
Yes, the delegate of the UK agrees with the delegate of Russia, as the delegate of Russia stated. This is very, very, very vague. It mentions things that already happened, things that are already occurring right now, such as when you look at subclause A, all countries cooperate to offer to the Black Lives Matter movement. Okay, that already happened. And there is no change, because the truth is that change begins with an educational system. Change begins with growing to learn to change. And this does not mention anything. It just mentions, let's spread awareness, and awareness is already everywhere. So the delegate of the UK agrees with the delegate of Russia.
Delegate of the USA, you have been recognized.
Does the delegate of the UK feel a sense of disappointment, especially when looking at Clause 3, in which the main submitters were not able to differentiate between calling for action and actually taking action, in which no repercussions for the hate speech and hate crime were mentioned whatsoever?
Thank you, delegate of the USA. That is completely correct. There is a sense of disappointment inside the delegate of the UK, and it's true. It's very true, and it's very evident, as stated 1,000 times already. This is very hypothetical. Where's the real solution? So thank you, delegate of the USA, for bringing that point up.
Thank you, delegate. Delegate of Iraq, you have been recognized.
Delegate of UK, did the delegate notice that all of these operative clauses can literally be effective, but then go like that as a trend culture?
Exactly, and that's what we're seeing today, trend culture. It's, of course, well, thinking about it, is it going to cause change? Realistically, no, because it's always going to turn into some form of trend culture where it's all about the trend and not really about the issue itself.
Okay, so we will now be moving on to more against speeches. Are there any on the floor? Delegate of Saudi, you've been recognized. You have 1 minute to give your against speech.
Thank you. First of all, the delegates of Saudi Arabia would like to start off by saying that this entire resolution is completely bogus and irrelevant to current day and age. Second of all, this entire resolution could have been written as one single operative clause with a million sub-clauses, as the only thing it is doing is raising awareness, which, as we are currently witnessing in day-to-day life, is absolutely useless. Second of all, Why are we going to be carrying out worldwide donations calling for help? How are donations going to help us avoid discrimination? How are donations going to erase a mindset that has been so ingrained in people since the 1800s or even before the 1800s? This resolution obviously doesn't deal with years and eras and centuries of ingrained racism. This resolution is absolutely pointless. Thank you.
Thank you, Delegate. Are there any points of information on the floor? Delegates of Lebanon, you've been recognized.
Does the delegates agree that this resolution revolves around the United Nations? In bold, in capital, in italics, underline the United Nations, referring to the youth for help when the youth do not have any power. Does the delegate agree that the other delegate has mentioned that this resolution talks about global cooperation when us, the delegations, are here in this council because there's barely any global cooperation? Does the delegate agree that the only way this resolution will pass and the only word that this resolution will pass is a word of fairy tales and daydreams and fake hopes?
The delegate highly appreciates the points brought about by the delegate of Lebanon. The delegate of Saudi Arabia completely agrees with every single point the delegate has brought about, because the delegate sincerely is extremely disappointed with how this resolution has been written, as it brings about no solution.
Thank you, delegates. We will now be moving to voting procedures due to time constraints. Those who are for this resolution, please raise your electronic hand now. Those who are against this resolution, please raise your electronic hand now. Those who are abstaining. Due to clear majority, this resolution does not pass. Clapping is out of order.
Okay, delegates, we will now be moving on to the next resolution. May the main submitter please read over the resolution.
So, firstly, to address the topic at hand, it's addressing the need for an exit strategy of COVID-19 measures in terms of the operative clauses. Firstly, affirming that all individuals are obliged to keep masks on. Keeping masks on has proven to be helpful in decreasing the spread of virus to spread less. 2, proclaim the reopening of tourists by allowing vaccinated individuals to travel. Only one quick test with negative results required to allow travelers to leave quarantine. 3, endorses measures to make the tourism prosper so the country's economy improves. Advertise traveling and landmarks. B, increase the engagement with cultural aspects of the society, which could contribute to an increased number of tourists. C, remove travel restrictions. 4, authorizes the improvement of healthcare services in developing countries to eliminate discrimination and distribution of resources. So increase the amount of utilities given to the public. For example, masks, sanitation equipment, etc. 5, asks public and private companies to share their financial reports with the government and increase salaries according to the company's economic stability, according to the revenue they make. So companies that are fully recovered can start gradually increasing salaries. B, employing former employees again. And 6th, encourages the strengthening of relationship between close family members and friends by allowing vaccinated individuals to gather in large groups, and B, provides services to help people strengthen their well-being and mental health in hospitals.
Okay, delegate, you now have 2 minutes to give your main submitter speech. Your time starts now.
The delegate of the US would like to yield the floor to co-main submitter delegate of France.
Okay, the delegate of France, you have 2 minutes to give your main submitter speech. Your time starts now.
Okay, so operative clause 1, affirming that all individuals are obligated to keep masks on. Now, obviously, a majority of the people are already doing that. However, in a lot of the places that you visit and go, a lot of people are generally have the mask just over their mouth and not over their nose, making the whole wearing the mask thing useless for them, which can cause them to spread the disease even further. And furthermore, a lot of people just don't wear the mask at all, which shouldn't happen because it's generally slowing down our progress through this pandemic. Number 2, proclaim the reopening of tourists by allowing vaccinated individuals to travel. Only one quick test with negative results required to allow travelers to leave quarantine. So this is going to be very helpful for those who are generally stuck at home and are feeling down and need to leave the house and have been vaccinated. Furthermore, this can improve tourism and economy, especially with countries that rely heavily on tourism. And number 3, endorses measures to make the tourism prosperous so the country's economy improves. Advertise traveling and landmarks, increase engagement with cultural aspects of the society, which could contribute to an increased number of tourists and remove travel restrictions. Most of these are self-explanatory, essentially just showing the good sides of each countries and how you can visit them and all the sites you can visit. Number 4, authorizes the improvement of healthcare services in developing countries to eliminate discrimination in distribution of resources. The majority of the countries, especially the most powerful ones, are hoarding, for example, vaccines or sanitizers or tissue paper, as an example, which is hilarious, but also wrong, because also the countries that are less developed or developing countries don't get a chance to get all these essential needs during the pandemic. Number 5, asks public and private companies to share their financial reports with the government. A lot of big companies are taking advantage of the pandemic and paying their employees less because
they think your time is done. You are now required to take 2 mandatory points of information. Are there any on the floor? Please raise your electronic hand now. Delegate of Iraq, you have been recognized.
How does the delegate plan to deal with the retaliation of people who are very anti-vax and countries that do not have the money or do not have the vaccinations to vaccinate every single individual?
Well, to answer the first question, to answer the second question, actually, a lot of the countries, especially the more powerful countries such as America that produce vaccines such as Pfizer, are willing to give out the vaccine to very poor countries, especially countries in Africa that have been hit the hardest with the vaccine, with the pandemic, because they're very financially unstable and lack the materials and resources to actually purchase the vaccine. So maybe perhaps an equal trade or like some sort of bartering can happen where they can trade resources or to just trade resources and materials.
A point of order, even though the delegate of France did address the question perfectly, isn't the issue of funds not supposed to be discussed as it goes back to the World Bank?
Yes, delegate, that is correct. Issues of funds should not be discussed. Moving on, are there any more points of information on the floor? Okay, so we're going to be moving on to for and against speeches. Are there any for speeches on the floor? Please raise your electronic hands. Delegate of the United Kingdom, you've been recognized. You have 1 minute.
Well, the truth is we need a solution. And this is the solution. This touches every single aspect we need. So why are we here contemplating whether we should make it pass or no when this addresses every single point? This resolution addresses the safety of individuals, the safety of countries as a whole, and as well as the economy, in a sense. So the delegate of the UK really supports this because it is a solution to a pandemic that we're facing. This is exactly what we need. This is going to help us make this issue into an issue that's just not an issue, that's just to dissipate the issue. At least this is a solution. Thank you.
Thank you, delegate. Is the delegate open to any points of information?
Any and all.
Are there any points of information on the floor? If so, please raise your electronic hand. Delegate of the United States, you've been recognized.
Does the delegate of the UK feel that his sense of disappointment previously has now been dispersed and relieved entirely, as this resolution does compensate for that, addressing all issues, all need, both in the short term and the long term, in full detail and clarity?
Thing is, because of this issue, there's no sense of disappointment anymore. It's gone. This issue solves it all. This is the shining sword of the future. This is why we are here for. this solves everything. There is no sense of disappointment. It's gone.
Are there any more points of information on the floor? Delegates of Lebanon, you've been recognized.
Does the delegates agree that COVID-19 is a fairly new disease that no nation ever expected, and that this resolution does or serves the absolute most, not necessarily the best, but the absolute most any nation could ever do to eliminate this issue, to decrease this issue?
Yes, the delegate is aware of that. However, this solution, if it does not solve everything, at least it very much helps it. And it's a very big reason for why everyone should vote for this. Because this resolution, if not solve all the issues in the world that we're facing about the pandemic, it at least dissipates the issue.
Thank you, delegates of the UK. Unfortunately, due to time constraints, we will not be entertaining any more amendments or speeches. We will now be moving on to voting procedure. All those for this resolution, please raise your electronic hands. Thank you. You may lower them. All those against this resolution, please raise your hands. Due to clear majority, this resolution has passed. Clapping is in order.
Thank you, delegates. We have come to the conclusion of our General Assembly session. We will now be moving on to our closing ceremony, which will start at 4:30 sharp.